Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
We're most pleased to welcome to our program today the co-founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center from Montgomery, Alabama, Morris Dees. He has a most distinguished career, as you well know, and I would describe Mr. Dees as the most effective activist for civil rights through his legal work of anyone since the death of Martin Luther King Jr. Our guest at an early age created the Fuller and Dees Marketing Group, which produced, among other things, the first aerospace encyclopedia. He is a trial lawyer, and as I've indicated, with the foundation, and through his organization work, they have combated hate groups throughout America that have victimized so many people in our country. For example, he was successful in a lawsuit in Alabama for a mother of Michael Donald, who was killed by members of the KKK, and he won a $7 million award for her. He also was successful with over $12.5 million award in Portland, Oregon, against the organization War, in which a Ethiopian gentleman had been killed. He won over $30 million in a suit against those who burned the black churches in South Carolina. And most recently, he won $6.3 million award for Victoria and Jason Keenan in their suit against the Aryan Nations and the Sapphire Corporation, Richard Butler, and the other defendants. Our distinguished guest has published in many areas. His autobiography is called A Season for Justice. He also has written Hate on Trial, Another Gathering Storm, America's Militia Threat. Also, A Time for Justice, which came out of his teaching tolerance program. The video received the 1995 Academy Award for Best Short Documentary. The list goes on, as well as the many awards he's received. He is with us in Coeur d'Alene today, really for a great celebration, the victory of justice and fairness over hate. And there's a great banquet this evening to honor him that sold out some time ago. With that, Morris Dees, welcome to the program. As our friend, we thank you for all you've done for this country and even the world, and also for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much. But let me say, the kind things you said about me are things that I didn't do all by myself. We have 92 people that work at the center. We have many lawyers, investigators, writers, editors, and people who've come before us. And also, our work wouldn't have been possible without the pro bono help from lawyers all over this country who've given their time, like Norm Gissel and Ken Howard in this community, who helped us free of charge on this case.
Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate your kind words. And as always, our regular panel members, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and Steve Shink, who's the Vice President of College Relations and Development at Federal College, and Janelle asked the first question.
Mr. Dees, as a trial lawyer, you've been involved in a number of high-profile cases. How do you decide which cases you're going to accept?
Well, it's kind of left up to the lawyers at the Southern Poverty Law Center. We don't have an agenda as such. We've done everything from file a suit to integrate the all-white Alabama troopers back in the early 1970s to integrating the YMCA. We moved on to defending people faced with capital cases, especially many of those who were innocent. We had the case in North Carolina representing a black woman who a jailer tried to rape her. She stabbed him and killed him, and yet they charged her with the death penalty. We've filed suits against companies who were polluters, both in the air and people's bodies through chemicals in factories. It depends on, what the issues are as of the day. Personally, I've been involved in fighting hate groups in court for about the last 20 years, starting in a case down in Texas representing the Vietnamese fishermen who had come there and tried to set up shop, and the Ku Klux Klan burned their boats and tried to run them out of the bay.
So you've had a variety of cases that the Southern Poverty Law Center has taken, but you've specialized in this area that deals with the hate groups.
Well, only in the last couple of decades. I've been a lawyer 40 years, and been there since 1960. It'll be 41 years this coming September, and I guess I've done every kind of case there is. Actually, I like to think that I represent individual people. I'm not a cause-oriented person. I'm not necessarily against this cause or for that cause. In the case here in Coeur d'Alene in Kootenai County, where we represented the Keenans, we got interested in the case because we had individuals who had been hurt and also who I felt had been denied justice, because had the same thing happened to them, happened to any other couple driving down a highway in most any other city or state in this nation, it would have been a attempted murder investigation. They would have taken the car and taken it in for evidence. That night, all they did was just give him a good handshake out on the street and let him go, even though it's pretty clear the authorities knew who did it. This community had become so inured to the brutality of the thugs that Richard Butler encouraged to come into this community, and the hatred he taught them, that the community almost was going along. I mean, we saw in this community Bill Wasmuth's house bombed. We saw people killed. We saw buildings downtown bombed, and the community kind of just said, well, you know, Butler's just over there. So when we looked at this case, and we got a call from Norm Gissel, the local lawyer who asked us to come in the case, and I didn't just decide to take it that moment. We actually sat down with the Keenans and talked to them, evaluated the situation, and I came away with the idea that these people have been made they're the victims, surely, but now they're blaming the victims. I mean, nobody wanted to believe that the Butler's people did anything wrong. Why'd they go out there and stop by in front of this people's place? You know, why do they have to be begged to prosecute? In most jurisdictions, the law enforcement authorities wouldn't even hesitate. They would have arrested the people almost immediately, and they kind of just said, well, you know, you boys, you come in after you have your next parade, and we'll talk to you a little bit, and we can't have you shooting up people on our streets. Well, you know, I don't think that's what the good people of this community wanted. And I don't think our clients, the Keenans, wanted that. And certainly, they're really, I think, brave people, the real heroes in this case, are people like Tony Stewart here with the Kootenai County Human Relations Task Force and Norm Gissel, who got into the situation and said, not in our town. We're not going to allow this anymore. And they encouraged and gave support to these victims. And that's really why I got into the case.
Thank you. Steve Sheen.
Mr. Deese, if I may, and I'm the least qualified person in the studio to talk about legal issues, but I'd like to follow up on Janelle's question a little bit. Certainly, as you've just pointed out, the rights of the victims is paramount. But were there some broader legal principles that you were interested in when you chose to accept the case in Coeur d'Alene?
You know, really not. Some people might say there's a broad question of free speech. Butler certainly tried to use that as a defense. There's no free speech. The First Amendment doesn't give you a license to do violence, and he actually encouraged his guards to go out and commit acts of violence. The evidence showed that. He'd been doing it for a long time, but nobody ever was able to really nail him. I guess the principle is that if you set up an organization, if there's a principle bigger than our client's interest, and you turn these people loose in a community, I don't care whether you're Walmart and you hire incompetent guards, or whether you're Richard Butler trying to get your anti-Semitic philosophy across, and you allow people to protect your place with assault rifles, with no training, who are known abusers of alcohol and drugs, and who recruited basically out of penitentiaries and brought into this fine community, then you got to pay. You can't do that under the imprimatur of this right to be different.
Tony, allow me a very quick follow-up.
Yeah.
It was any of what you've just described, and I'm thinking specifically of the link that you were able to establish between what is protected, free speech, the right to, unfortunately, to disparage minorities and others, with actions, violent actions that you can show were instigated by that free speech. Is that new legal ground at all, or had that all been plowed before?
Well, it really hasn't been plowed as the way we did it. I think sometimes civil libertarians are too prone to say, well, you know, this is a close line, and we're not going to tread on the feet of these people burning down abortion clinics and, you know, doing violence. So we're going to let these Nazis go out and do this. But, you know, in America, you have the right to hate, but you don't have the right to hurt people. And that's the line. And in this case, the jury saw it. The judge saw it. The judge made comments during the trial, which are so clearly allowing us to go for punitive damages. I mean, he basically said that if a company did this, there wouldn't be any question. And Butler's in here, you know, saying that we're trying to bankrupt him because of his views. Now, his group was bankrupted because of its views. That's why it was bankrupted. It had no value in the operation. I mean, I respect people who have differing opinions. I respect people who stand up for the rights of their, quote, group they happen to represent. But you don't do it with going into the prisons and bringing people into the community to terrorize the citizens, planning marches down the street with weapons. What do you need weapons for? Nobody's ever shot at them. I mean, they're the ones that shoot at other people. I mean, he's just baiting this community for trouble. And I'm so proud to see this community stand up at last, finally, in a way that the whole community and this country can be proud. I'd like to see the governor of this state, the mayor of this town, the sheriff, and other officials lead a human rights parade a week before Butler's next planned parade. A community in Pennsylvania did it. The governor came. 2,000 people showed up. The Klan marched 3 days later, and nobody attended. 15 or 20 Klansmen showed up. But those people, and they said, we're not going to stand for this in our community. And I think when the average citizen in an area sees the elected leaders and officials stand up and say, we're not going to have this behavior, we're better than that, then the citizens have somebody to lead. I think too many people in this community saw a hesitancy to take action. And they saw people like Tony, who worked with the Cooney County Human Rights Commission, as kind of a bunch of people on the other side, kind of the leftists, so the ultra liberals. Well, that's so wrong. That is so wrong. I mean, I know and I know how Tony must have felt, because I felt a little bit like that when I came into this case. I felt like the sheriff in the movie Jaws. You know, he was running up and down the beach saying, ho, ho, you know, get out of the water, there's some danger out there. And the people saying, shh, shh, this is a tourist town, be careful, we don't want to scare people away. Well, I think this is a time to take a stand. And I was so glad to see this community take a stand, starting with the jury and the judge, a courageous judge, and finally Greg Carr stepping forward to put up the money to make a shrine out of this hate-filled place into a place of brotherhood and love and sisterhood. And I think that's so important.
Thank you very much.
Morris, among the other things that you do, and I have had the pleasure of talking to a number of your staff. It's a remarkable group. You choose well. Is your intelligence department and your staff there. And you put out great publications, and you keep track of hate groups and activity across America. Our governments even rely upon a lot of your good information. Would you share with us at this time, as we're taping the program, what you see conditions and situation to be around America, dealing with the various hate groups and their activities?
Well, there's a slight increase in the number of individual hate groups. The big, large Klan-type groups have kind of gone by the board. The Aryan Nations really is a shamble of its former self, even though it might look like it's not. The white Aryan resistance and a bunch of these groups, skinheads, are falling by the wayside. Still, though, there are an individual growth in the number of individual groups. There are around 600 or so that we've been able to track. They scatter, they're all over the country. They're not just in the South, not just in the West, they're everywhere. But the most dangerous thing we're seeing today is the advent of what I call a virtual group. There are 360 hate websites on the net now. There was one in 1995. And these websites, some are operated by these hate groups, and some are operated by individuals, but they're very sophisticated and they're slick. There have been several thousand hate websites out there, but there are only about 300 or 400 that are really persistent. And now somebody in Idaho and in California and in Alabama can log on to the web. They can find people with the same views they might have. They can download information. They can email each other. And all of a sudden, some real misfit over here is saying, wow, somebody else has got my views. And then they're talking to them, and next thing you know, they've got a group. Now, these are people that would never get caught dead at a skinhead rally, wouldn't know how to find Aryan Nation's compound if you tried to show them on a map. But yet they can, in anonymity of their own homes, they can log onto the internet, and they can trade this information, and they become dangerous. And why they're dangerous is because you get the lone wolves in them operating, individuals who feel like Timothy McVeigh felt. If I don't do something, this country's going to hell in a handbasket. these enemies I perceive, and these people are paranoid. They're a few bricks light of a load, and they're out there thinking somebody's going to get them. And so they have to strike first. And you get enough of them together like this, and then they begin to get some energy in their cooperation, and then you'll have something bad happening that you can't track. It's hard to follow. I think the virtual groups are our biggest thing. And to respond to that, and something I came here to announce.
Yeah, this is exciting. I was going to ask you that next.
Yeah, we're announcing the formation. Actually, we just turned it on the web, of a response to the hate groups on the web. We call it tolerance.org. And we have a pretty massive website. Yahoo is giving us $3 million worth of free ads and responses. So when you come up with a hate site web, there's going to be a little thing flashing, you want to know the truth about this group? Or let us tell you what this group really does. In addition, we'll have what we call human rights maps, where people can log on in their communities to find out what good people are doing, like what people are doing in this community with the Human Rights Task Force, so people can join up. Whether somebody's got a group that supports the rights of gays and lesbians, or supports the rights of people who are older, or whatever the group might be. And we're encouraging people all over this nation to form these groups. The website has a pretty broad-based thing, and I encourage people to log on, tolerance.org. Cisco Systems has given us a substantial grant because they feel that the web and internet should be used in a positive way. And I hope that we'll be able to interlink all the other good things that people do in this country, because people are doing more good things than bad things. But I've always heard as a boy that it's easier to throw hand grenades than it is to catch them. And a few butlers tossing hand grenades makes a lot more racket than good people out there trying to live their lives in their communities and make things better.
But your website, tolerance.org, is making that connection in the country. And I saw some of your literature where you also talked about there's a lot more human rights groups than there are the hate groups. And so by getting this kind of organization together,
right,
that can be a combative method around the United States in
no
a more
question.
organized way.
No question. And there, I would imagine before 5 years is up and this website's really going, we'll identify at least 10,000 groups of one type or another on a community, state, and national level that people can participate in, and hopefully people will form more. But in addition, we also have information for teachers, for parents, how to raise empathetic and tolerant children, for kids themselves. We have something called Planet Tolerance, where kids can come in a safe way and discuss these very controversial issues that bother them. And then we have tests that people can take to determine their own, like latent or hidden biases in a number of areas.
At the banquet now, we're going to have at every seat a wonderful publication of 101 ways to deal with tolerance that you sent to us. And there's all kind of material that you have that does that, in addition to the millions of dollars you spend on materials for teachers and schools in the country. But I'm excited about the new website, and I knew it was coming. You had shared it with me. Janelle Burke.
There are so many questions I'd like to ask. I think I better stick to my agenda, though, and say you at the Southern Poverty Law Center have been involved in a number of cases, and a lot of those had some constitutional issues in them. Do you ever find yourself at odds with some of the other civil rights organizations when it comes to those issues?
I don't really think so. Maybe they don't understand what we might be doing at the time, because a lot of civil rights organizations, at least some of them, are anti-law enforcement, and we're not. They're good and bad law enforcement. They're good and bad everything. We work very closely with law enforcement in this country. First of all, protect ourselves from the threats that people make against us and the actual attempts to do harm, but also supplying law enforcement with positive information. One aspect of the website is going to be a place for law enforcement to learn about things to prevent racial profiling and stuff like that. In all the cases that we've done, I'm sure the ACLU, which is a very fine organization, I served as president of the Alabama ACLU years ago, when all the members could be gotten in this small room or less, in the 60s. They've looked at all the cases, probably looked at decide whether to help Butler with his case. But what they found in every case was we were not attacking individual rights and freedoms of speech or anything, right to assembly. We was attacking conduct. Lynching people, killing people, shooting at people by individuals who are agents of these organizations. And we really don't have any conflict that way.
And you're using civil remedies to relieve people as opposed to criminal actions.
Yes, we're not prosecutors, even though I have been a federal prosecutor. I was appointed to go after a bunch of guys stealing explosives from Fort Bragg, military base, and we were going to use them to blow up some blacks in a school bus. Because of our knowledge and connection with the case, I was appointed, along with my partner, special prosecutors, and we convicted 2 guys and put them in prison, uncovered a big scheme of stealing military explosives that these guys were involved in. But our remedies are civil remedies, and they're not always, trying to take a person's house and income away. We're not going after some of these individual defendants in this case and trying to garnish their wages. I mean, some of these guys like Michael Teague, one of the defendants in this case, I'm sure he's out working some ways, a roofer, at least last I heard, and I'm sure we could garnish his wages and take 20 or 30% of his wages. He's a poor man. He's got children. He's just having a hard time making ends meet as it is. He's misled by Butler, too. We put him in the suit so the jury could see the whole cast of characters. We know the main target, and that's Richard Butler and the leaders that were behind him. But what we don't have any idea that we'd collect millions of dollars from Butler. That's what the jury in this community thought his egregious conduct was worth. But it doesn't mean that we won't go after him for everything he's got. Naturally, he bankrupted, so you know that. But I think that civil remedies can be pretty powerful. Not only does it cause people to worry about their money, it causes them to worry about being taken into court, deposed, their bank accounts checked, all the kinds of things that you do in a civil case that makes people, think twice before they go out and encourage people to do acts of violence.
Mr. Deese, looking back on a 40-year legal career and a distinguished career in service to human rights, is there anything that you are most proud of?
Other than my family, I think probably on an individual level, the thank yous that you get from people you represent that can't pay a fee, whose lives you're able to straighten out, or help out, is the biggest thanks you get. And it's the kind you can take to the bank, and you don't have to worry about inflation affecting it. On the other hand, I think having the Poverty Law Center grow like it's grown and having influence around the nation is something that certainly makes me very proud. And I'm probably most proud of the individuals who committed their lives and their sometimes risk of their safety to work with us to do the work that we do.
Well, I know Tony should have the last question, but I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity just to comment on something you said earlier, because I'm running out of time on this show. I'll be leaving the area soon myself, but I couldn't agree with you more that the real heroes in this community are indeed people like Tony Stewart and so many others who have put themselves, as you have, at risk, personal safety risk, to do something for other people. That's a remarkable gift you both have made, and I'm just proud to have been slightly associated with it. Thank you.
I have to respond to that too, Morris. I have to say that, like Morris did, that anything that you try to do, there's a great group of people, and that list is long here in our area, in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene and the whole region. Morris, I also, I just am so honored to have you as a friend, and again to thank you so much for what you've done for the people here as you have around the country. I'd like you to take a little time to speak to the very special memorial that you had built. I'm a great believer in memorials, and some people gave their lives for this cause, and one of your great qualities is that you recognize that, and it flows with water. Would you just share with viewers who've never seen it?
Well, sure. I think recognizing people who've lost their lives or maybe even come close to, like Vic and Jason Keenan, I mean, there I failed to mention the fact that without them we wouldn't have a lawsuit. We realized back in the 1970s, early 70s, in that area of time, that young people's memory of the civil rights movement was fading quickly, and that's a pretty important thing in the history of this country. They knew who Dr. King was, who was killed, and maybe Medgar Evers, but not the others. We checked and found that there were some 40 people that died in the civil rights movement, about twice the number of the history books had even recorded. A lot of research there. People who died because of their involvement one way or the other in the civil rights movement, mostly in the South. So we got Maya Lin, who did the Vietnam War Memorial, to create a memorial honoring those people, and she did a beautiful memorial made out of black granite with water pouring over a big circular table with their names and stories all around it in clockwise fashion, interspersed with critical moments in the history of civil rights, like Rosa Parks failing to give up her seat and stuff like that. And then across a wall that runs around behind that, water flows over this big wall, is the words that Dr. King used so often when he went around this country at a time when our nation had drifted from its ideals, taken from the book of Amos, where Amos was chastising his people, and he said, "Don't be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." And that's the backdrop for this memorial. It's her second most famous memorial, and millions of people visited it and have visited it since we installed it.
You know, that is so important to recognize those, and you always do that because of them, then the progress is made. We just almost out of time. In the little time we have left, would you just mention a few more things about some of your colleagues? I'm thinking of people like Richard Cohen. You have a very special staff.
We do. We brought a group of people with us that worked with Norm Gissel and plaintiff's lawyer Ken Howard in this case, and yourself. Richard Cohen, our legal director, bright young lawyer from Virginia. Pete Tepley, who's from South Carolina, who helped us on the Klan arson case representing the Macedonia Baptist Church. Our investigators, Joe Roy, and the whole staff of people, including our security staff, that most all of them came up here. And I also want to thank the local law enforcement people here who supported us, and even as we're here now, to make sure that nobody in this community gets hurt and that we all carry on peacefully.
We thank you, Morris Dees. We'll always be eternally grateful to you, and people all over this country are safer because of you, and human rights has been enhanced, and human dignity is. I always say that there's three great principles: freedom, equality, and justice, and you're an advocate and a crusader for all of them. And I know you like to be called a trial lawyer, and you're a great one. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been so pleased to have Morris Dees on our program, and a remarkable man, and has a remarkable center, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we would urge you to visit it sometime and be emotionally moved by what is there and the message, and they will continue to do the work that they've done in the past. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we will move to yet another issue. And I would also like to invite you to write to us or call us from time to time. We love to respond to your wishes and your needs. You, as our viewers, are very important to us. And please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College,
Thank you so
Public
much,
Forum
Mark.
is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.